I'm going to give a really short version of a previous video's entire content. If this is necessary, then the comment left under the video will be addressed, and it's from the same person that caused the previous video. In the 1950s, early part, the CIA decided to influence colleges and college students through the National Student Association and who knows what else by funding and influence peddling. That's what I'm going to call it. This ended approximately 1967 because Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze, and Free Love happened, and they found out that they'd waste a bunch of money on college students. This won't be the first or last time they've done it, by the way. Next, 1973, a file was created called the Family Jewels file within one of the three-letter agencies and who knows what else by a specific individual. It is a retro compilation of all of the dirty tricks and bad stuff that was done by that agency and others back to 1959. In it, it mentioned a 1963 project called Project Mockingbird. This is a 1 or 2 year period of time, depending on how you look it up, a period of time where wiretapping was done to 2 people. And it was called Project Mockingbird. And it was to find the sources the journalists were using, because the sources kept giving information that seemed almost like cut and paste copies of information that would lead back to it being someone with access to nuclear intelligence secrets, classified data, and top secret data within the U.S. government that shouldn't be able to leak. And it came to nothing, just like trying to get a bunch of pot-headed students to do what you want. Project Mockingbird involved 2 people and the CIA, or other. The Family Jewels file was created by one of the 3-letter agencies about all the crap they pulled since, 1959 to 1973. And again, 1950 to 1967, there was a period of time where the CIA specifically tried to influence college students through the National Student Association, and it kind of worked. Now, all of these together amount to not a nothing burger, but examples of what? Now, that's for you to interpret, but none of the above cited sources, as we're going to call them, contain a reference to something called Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird doesn't exist, or at least didn't exist, by the time this expression was coined. Okay, go figure. Project Mockingbird did exist. Now, one of the rules about creating these project names, these crypto names or crypto-nyms, is you either call them project or operation, and then usually 2 words like gerbil hamster. The way you come up with what to call them is you run a random number generator or throw some dice to come up with 2 letters of the alphabet, usually, if not always. Sometimes 3. And you come up with 2 words that come up that haven't been used before. So Project Mockingbird in 1963 would not be used as a name because of the word mockingbird there. Because at that point you're dealing with, it would have been PM or OM, but it probably would have just been the letter N, or more accurately MB for mockingbird. And I bring that up in the previous video, but that's the most likely thing. It's like Project Total Freedom, TF, instead of Team Fortress, which is what it should be. But the point is, none of the above actually gave credence to the Operation Mockingbird meme you might have seen on the internet. That came only from one human being writing a book that was an expose about a newspaper that this quote-unquote journalist might have had a axe to grind against. Deborah Davis wrote a book about Katharine Graham and the Washington Post and made a mythology by remixing together a single reference in the Family Jewels document that referred to the Project Mockingbird, a single incident involving just 2 people, and then spun this into 30 years of the CIA infiltrating mainstream media, producing domestic propaganda, and using all mainstream media for it. The idea with this, if you're not aware of it, is somebody doing an expose and a diss track, like a rap artist, against every bit of mainstream media, and this is eaten up by conspiracy theorists because they want to believe that literally everybody's in on something. Now, one of the memes about this is that you say, if a bunch of people are in on it, maybe they're not aware of it. Maybe they're tricked into it. Now, I want to point out something else. The job of the CIA to infiltrate the news in other countries like Russia and China and North Korea is a thing. And they did it, and they got caught, and some spies were killed. And you know what else? Mainstream media in the United States was infiltrated by Chinese, Russian, and North Korean operatives. And they were either exchanged so somebody didn't get killed or just shot because they're spies. Because it was the Cold War, and you know damn good well that happened. But no. It has to only be our side doing it to our side. Well, that's what they want you to think. Yes, that is. There's a group of people in the United States that believe that you have to be anti-government to the point you make up completely bizarre stories like this. Deborah Davis did this as an axe to grind work against the Washington Post and the person who at the time was in charge of most of it, Katharine Graham. It was an indictment with no evidence. And it used a misinterpretation of the word Mockingbird, MB, which would have been the roll of the dice numbers or letters. This individual, Deborah Davis, was interviewed apparently by Ken Thomas of Steam Shovel Press in 1992. And as of right now, there's only one purported image of her, and I used it in a video. It didn't get flagged. I didn't get a notation that I'm using a copyrighted work, and I also ran an image reverse search, and it only goes back to her. The image was taken down by request 20 years ago. Now, the CIA, under its own initiative, meaning not following the laws, and or the president, or the National Security Council, or some other thing like Congress, has done massive amounts of illegal shit domestically. Wiretapping, surveillance, assassination plots, all sorts of crap they're not supposed to do. Doing it in other countries is fair game. Doing it here isn't. But if you're dealing with people infiltrating the United States, that's used as a justification for doing it, because how would you tell? This is the central conundrum where you have to have a, to be on the safe side, don't do an operation against anyone in the United States, period. That's the way the rules are done. The President of the United States at the time is the one who actively okayed Project Mockingbird against the two journalists because he was mad. That's why the President should be able to do this, either. Period. So anyway, let's go on. Oh, and the assassination plot, yeah, that actually happened, including an entire city block being burned down, bombed, actually. But that may not have been it. And, of course, an assassination plot against Castro. But it's a foreign country, so it's okay. Now, Congress knew about this the entire time until it was declassified in 2007, officially. It was known about in the 70s, and it was an open secret. That's where Deborah Davis got this idea. And the Operation Mockingbird conspiracy theory was about everything before the book came out in the 1970s. That's it. That's the whole story from the previous video in 8 minutes. So I get this comment. Now remember, this person simply said, oh, this is all part of Operation Mockingbird. So I'm talking about some other video. I was aware of Project Mockingbird wiretapping, which is why I deliberately chose to use the term generically as Operation Mockingbird to cover the general theory of media infiltration. No, you didn't. That's bullshit. There's no evidence in what you posted, what you said, which has been archived, and your channel content. There's no link anywhere to you discussing this on a blog. Most people who post these kind of comments either have nothing to show for what they really believe, so they can always just make claims and change it like this, or they have a shit ton of evidence that they have this attitude. We're going to see how far your rabbit holing goes. What kind of bunny are you? Are you a jackrabbit or a jackalope? We can safely say it's true. No, we can't, because again, I just pointed out that the Operation Mockingbird is bullshit from 1970 backward, because again, the book was an axe to grind book against a newspaper and a person running it. It had nothing to do with truth, and it was exposed for being filled with factual errors. The journalism word can't be used here. Deborah Davis's book is not an example of journalism. It's a fictitious work. Doesn't matter what they call it. Doesn't matter what you call it to avoid a lawsuit. And her book was taken down not because it exposed anybody. It's not suppressed because of that. It's because it's a giant bunch of lies against people who can sue and could confirm it was never true. Saying things about dozens of other people that were demonstrably untrue, because saying someone was in the East Coast when they were on the West Coast, Basic shit like that will get you in a court case. The media machine is so brazen about lying, covertly and openly. There are many examples. As with almost everything in the grand conspiracy of who runs the show and what they're up to, there's so much doubt sown by the very perps we are seeking just to cover their own tracks. And he spells tracks with an X. The word perps is used on the internet in a way that makes you get marked as being a person who believes that they're being a targeted individual, a TI. Please don't use that word unless you really want to be assumed that. Perp actually just means perpetrator. But if you write it out as perps, it's a dog whistle you're using at this point. Along with everything else I just skipped. I'll bring it up in a minute. Signature reduction, fake ID. There may or may not be an official or unofficial Operation Mockingbird. There isn't one. Again, it was an invention someone created, but using it as a thumbnail these days would be acceptable, except immediately if someone actually looks up where it comes from, you find out it's bullshit. Sort of like saying the word perp. It just marks you as a person who's repeatedly going to use a word that will get a specific reaction. Operation Mockingbird isn't real. The word perp marks you as being a person who's never going to listen. And claiming, oh, I knew this was about Project Mockingbird. No, you didn't. Otherwise, you would have mentioned it. Otherwise, you would have something on your channel that indicates you actually look this stuff up. You would have at least explained yourself better than saying, oh, I knew that. I knew that? This is sounding more like a cold reading where I'm trying to find out what you have, and I'm getting nothing here. But do you think it's not true? Embedded journalists pushing an agenda with a narrative. Yes, it's done by RT, Russia Today on YouTube, because they're literally a propaganda channel. There's dozens of them. Do you acknowledge that they do that or not? Oh no, they tell us the truth. They never lie to us. Deborah Davis's book was a hit piece on an entire newspaper and a bunch of people in journalism, probably out of spite. We don't have her actual history for anything else. I can't find a biography on her. She seems to have dropped off the face of the earth after the 90s. Who writes the script for the world leaders? In 2003, speeches by Australia Prime Minister and Canada were the same, almost, about a specific subject. Is this an accident? No, because they were also identical to what the President of the United States said, because they contacted each other and said, we need to say this, because they were united in a war they were going to start. And they didn't tell anybody. And it was a war against not our opponent. Weapons of mass destruction. No, it was payback, and it was avoiding attacking where we eventually found out the attackers came from, and we're still dealing with that. Now, the other thing is this person brought up is weapons of mass destruction, the church committee, etc. Everything, why don't you bring up JFK magic bullet theory that isn't a magic bullet and wasn't pristine? Why don't you do that on this channel? This is the hill you came to die on. Now let's bring up the last one. This was one of the things you mentioned, 9/11. The media machine was lying about 9/11. The media machine in the case of weapons of mass destruction and 9/11 were told what to say by the U.S. government overtly. We found that out since then, because only the government was able to do the investigation of the subject at the time. And yes, lots of stuff was supposed to have been covered up by people who didn't want to look bad because they didn't stop it from happening, because they couldn't, because they're incompetent. But the journalists showed us that they did become incompetent, and the journalists weren't lying about 9/11. Again, most of these are examples of people repeating the best information they had available, or in the case of Bush, flat out repeating a lie they were told because the liar was convincing. This isn't an example of the Operation Mockingbird being a real thing, and no, you didn't know about it before you contacted me, because you don't show any evidence of it. If you did, show me where you posted. That's it. That's all you have to do, right? So, was it a magic bullet, pristine, or bent almost in a horseshoe like it really was? Is it impossible to fire that gun, even though I personally fired an identical gun? Please tell me your experience with these things. Of course, I don't know anything. I'm just an idiot on the net. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.